Yes, good evening, folks. It's May 25th, and just going to give you an update. Just in the last couple of days, I left another video referred to as Gom'S Gospels, the grumpy old man, but this is Gom'S Gospels number 9, and you may find it on the social media, but you can always go to YouTube, Google me under Lynn Johnson or Gom'S Gospels. And there are numerous videos there you can fill yourself in as you might see fit. However, for the people that have been watching my videos and are aware of some things in the background over the last several years, because of prior self-taught and associations over many years with highly accredited and on the books legitimate top sales executives, horses' mouths in numerous industries, sciences, technologies, and the age-old thing of the horse's mouth, the definitive origin of truths based on fact, on the overall conclusions of what truth is or what reality is. And, relative to the other things, that I am an INFJ. That is a person we have about 1% of the population. We have a sixth sense in the regard that we have a subconscious ability to kind of feel and recognize patterns and become aware of things. Sometimes people misinterpret it as a paranoid or there's something to this, and it's not. But truth of the matter is, over time, I have formatively and realistically come up with a way of, and as we say, the practicality of it is, and an old intellectual, PhD in physics, biophysics and education, who literally built a couple of universities over on the other side of the Atlantic in the, I would say, the what would be called the more of the Eastern European, East Mediterranean area. He had a physics, biophysics, and education. Former head of the United Nations Environmental Council, and as far as symbiotics, meteorology, and ionization, the basic building block of the universe, and the other things that I've studied as far as formative and what would you call it? What do they call it? Sacred geometries, the actual formative geometries of realities as it is. And as soon as reality becomes something, it becomes a wave function. Wave always has what is known as a flux. So you have the motion, and you have the positive and the negative. And no matter what, you always have a trinity as far as the reality of an existence in real terms. The indicative, the apparency, and the positive, the negative, or the comparative, or reality. One extreme to the other, and the evaluative. Simple as that. Reality is one extreme to the other, and the evaluative, no matter what. And so, that being the case, I had been in sales and marketing for many years, and the other things, but my forte had always been in the background, environmental and symbiotics, atmospherics, building stuff, and over the years as a polymath, and my ability, as I say, to with my, we'll call it my God-given 1% of whatever is these patterns and that, and intuitive, on the realities that a person's thought dynamics and memory do not exist within the cellular or the human level. It is all within the flux of the external and your pineal gland, which is the antenna. And simple concentration, a combination of a couple of emotional states in a neutral accepting thing puts you in a neutral passive peaceful state, at which point it starts clearing, and it kind of lends on, and it kind of leads you, as they say, the age-old thought of the divine enlightenment, or the guiding path, that if you're in that state in your pineal, in terms of react, because human behavior, antenna, or whatever, or your instincts or your intuitions, it's all in the one thing, it's an act, or react, or a stimulus, or a response, or the cause and the effect. It doesn't matter what it is. But with these evaluatives, and these things about over time, trial and error. And, you know, an age-old thing back when I had had a very bad illness, had been misdiagnosed and mismedicated at a time when, prior to chronic fatigue syndrome and all those things, and misdiagnosis, whatever it was. Um, I ran into a book and some things about a couple of thoughts as far as an intuitive, and all of a sudden it worked. And essentially, I concentrated and worked and practiced on it just like anything. One thing led to another. And my intuitive, or my, shall we call it intuitive or psychic or telepathy, and this drive for the common sense of old paradigms, whether it is the common sense is from a sociological dynamic of keeping a community or things in order, not from a religious or spiritual and argumentative or the state or the non-state or all those things, but the common sense of simple paradigms over centuries on gender realities and gender tendencies and unchangeables on gender-specific things and the considerations of the realities and fairness of the divine moral code or whatever, not, you know, which is from a trinity or the light wave or the love state or whatever, the love or light or God's light, which is the Christ dynamic, not as far as the human, but the divine light of love, God's love, and all those things about as substantiated by the equation of divine proportion, those geometric functions that I had on exact calculations of pi's and all the other interpretatives. That essentially kind of gives you the whole unified theory and interpretive mathematics and things, all of it as it is. And yes, it was somewhat rather borrowed unscrupulously many years ago on a fact that was proven at that time. And it became apparent over time, as far as the obvious, it's showing up as far as efficiencies that are enabling exact calculation. Let me show you this. With the standard geometric function evaluation for the calculation of pi, it's a repetition on the geometric thing that goes on and it just never ends. But it's the same repetition. On mine, it was an exact as far as the circular function, as far as the geometric comparative. And it's simple as this. If you needed an exact mathematic function that wasn't there and all of a sudden it is, oh boy, because at that point, well, for efficiencies, fractal generation, speed efficiencies, exact calculations for things like super colliders, the Montauk and all these Montauk and a whole bunch of other things. And then more recently, there was another copyright that, you know, via electronic, supposedly secure transmission, and eavesdropping in that, and trail of indicatives. There was a thing called a Transact debit card. Yeah, you got it. There was all of a sudden a big new thing, and on copyright comparatives. It was an identical copy of my whole format. And how did I have that? Because I researched cryptocurrencies. I've been into marketing for years, and as far as stuff on, well, so let's say, you know, laws of things as far as businesses and contract law, marketing, trade commissions, currency. I took I went through my stockbroker security manual when I was a kid, and overall comprehensive evaluations, but went to hold account, but on the go, but on this other thing, there is a several $100 trillion environmental thing on the scope of actual proven scientific paradigms that say, as far as overall cost and efficiencies and balances to zeros and gains in CO2s, it definitely will work. You can regulate temperature, you can do all these wonderful things, but unfortunately it is counter and contradictory to some of these things. These pipe dreams in terms sounds like a really good idea, but a lot of world programs that are being formative by supposed big rich guys in the world and AI and electric and all of this and software, they don't work in the overall balance, because it's proven by account of the United Nations environmental Antonio Gutierrez a year and a half ago, global warming is still going up. And because of my background and my other people that I've known for many, many years as entrepreneurs and respected in international banking, energy board, criteria, quantitative things for all these things, and having done things that said I know what I'm doing, well, we came up with some overall evaluatives of criteria that would basically drop global warming, allow you to regulate, fix and have some things as far as ozone state repairs, stabilization, on prior things and assessments and patent pendings that I disclosed that had been basically approved and acknowledged, and we're getting going at with mass aerospace back when 911 kicked into gear and all of a sudden it was shelved. At that time, when the vice president was a former head of the largest corporate industrial construct in the world, and known as the corporation that trained industry in the oil industry, period, the largest engineering company, assembly of mines, engineers, and stuff, and of which I had a technical engineering certificate proficiency back in what I don't know, mid 80s in hydraulics and hydrostatics, round calculations of pi, and then Dr. Charles Wallach's in ionization, the basic building blocks of the universe, and some other things. And it's just like anything. You want to build a house, and it's out of brick and some components. If you got the bricks and you know how to put them together, pretty easy to build and stack up anything. Or if you see a brick house and some other components, you know how to measure and evaluate it and bring it down and figure out what you need to build, cost, time estimates. Same thing for interrelations as far as industry, as far as different styles of things, leading indicators, crop dynamics, whether, world regional things, trade. It's not that difficult, but if you have a general all-over assessment and you have a way of generally assessing and having a feel for things, it works. But as mentioned, 3 or 4 years ago, all of a sudden something came up with a situation that this COVID, and all of a sudden I found out from the horse's mouth there's something there's about a concern, because it obviously wasn't what it said it was. Other PhDs and Nobel Prize winners and certain things relative to the technologies that were, in their opinion, being misaligned and misrepresented and a bunch of yah-yah. I immediately started responsibly noting these things to politicians, heads of things, and the reaction was no reaction. And over time, things were being stood in the way, criteria to who was accountable. And over the next 3 or 4 years, with all this other stuff coming up, it became very notable that interference in my apps and the email apps and on, and nobody would get back. But it was all criteria, how it was basically very cleverly formatted and covered up for an unscrupulous thing, which is criminal, which is not good for the world, which is a deception, and a whole bunch of other etc. That the interference in my phone, it finally came down to in the last 48 hours, after some of the things that I counted out in social media, that you cannot trust anything, even if it looks real, whether with ChatGPT and replacing white collar and vicarious liabilities and accountability, that you've got to get back to the age-old thing of the face-to-face or the call to the introductory process of the sales format or the presentation on gender-specific human psychology that you presented in a way that it registers with them as not a trick, it's logical, it's trustworthy on the evidence of what it is, the criteria of the proper set of the benefits and that, and the close to basically allow a person to decide if they need it at that time or not. And there are numerous other things. Am I rich and famous? No, I'm not. Have I been, do I have a big deal? No, I don't. But over time, I have worked with some of the top executives, some of the top intellectuals and things on truth based on fact. I can provide you references, and worked with those groups and things, and certain things as far as aspects of marketing or evaluation, of setting things up, of, a top-end sales group. So basically moving in and coming up against people that have been there for 2.5, 3 years, using practicals that I've learned from known and respected paradigms and aspects of taking the best of this and that and mix it specific to what you need so it works. And who did I, some things like Jared F. Diamond, Guns, Germs, and Steel. We have the scientific thing about the act, react, and the reality of civilizations, the basic scientific give or take of paradigms adjacent what causes societies to do this or conflict or expand or contract. the mentality of the mind. Dr. Richard Zukov. Fear, love, and fear is the two basic dynamics of the human and emotional state of the basics. Actually, to be improved, Dr. Wayne Dyer, who said it's only one, love. He says going in the right way, giving and additional and caring and infinite as far as its capabilities, peace of mind, adequacy, security, peace of mind, and cool and calm and that. Or going the backwards, which point you're desperate or comparative or suspicious or nervous or aggressive or unscrupulous or simple. And then as far as other things, or a tip of the hat to Tony Robbins many years about the obvious, about the asking of the obvious question. It's very simple. Or other things about the obvious things about the art of the reframe, as he mentioned, or examples like, for example, the comparative, like there was guys like considered the top legal mind in Canada, Dr. Morris Shumiacher, years ago when I was in real estate and I was a kid, and I was always bugging him to sell some property that he always had down in southwestern Regina and stuff, and he wanted to know what it was for. And then, well, I'm not at liberty to say, well, fine, is it commercial? No. Is it residential? Fine, then it's religious. And then we get talking. But his forte is one thing. In an article years ago, he was always looking at the psychological aspects of the real against the real to basically demonstrate the reality of how the person's mental state was at the time, as far as to depend on accountability, guilt, or the relative involvement, or the aspect of victimization, this and that. Another guy, for example, on the art of the reframe, there was Ted Kennedy and Mitt Romney one night in a debate. And all of a sudden, Mitt Romney said something, and Ted Kennedy says, well, excuse me, but you're no Jack Kennedy. Whoop, and sinking ship. Or another one was, say for example, Ronald Reagan one time when he was in the debate against, who was it? At any rate, the younger fellow was saying, he's old and this and that, and I'm so young and energetic and that. And Ronald Reagan said, yes, and age comes from wisdom, and perhaps I have a whole lot more practical experience, blah, blah, blah. Ronald Reagan won a sinking ship. A comparative. Abraham Lincoln, another thing. The art of the reframe of the comparative and simple general terms about common sense. Big thing is big thing. The Mississippi River running north and south, New Orleans. The river boats, the big bucks, and that, they were running north and south, and they were road hogs. So north and south had the priority, and they wouldn't stop for anybody. Then it became the argument, how do the people going east to west and west to west, there's a great big yah-yah. And it was just, the definitive was the evaluation and equality thing. Who should have more priorities? People heading north and south in this world, or the people east and west and east? And decision made on common sense. Again, you have a lot of things these days about majority rules in terms of population and this and that, as far as depopulation, disparity in rules against this and the bigger and the better. So the population, the formative, and the tight little clubs in the big cities, and moving it in, and the regional and the disparities end up out in the regionals. And the simple equality thing again. Well, what's the deal, Why should the opportunities or the viabilities in terms of ability for a person to have ability to live and have some things in the city take more priority and equality than the people in the country? Exactly. Question mark again. Or the other thing on the gender equality, the male-female thing. Well, on gender realities, about gender realities of the reality, okay, of the gender things that are unchangeable, and those are the truths. And equality in terms of basically respect for each other on an equality basis of respect for each other on the gender realities, and those realities relevant to each gender. Fair enough. Or on another thing, the other thing on the equality, whether on political differences of this or the spiritual or whatever, is on an equal basis. Everybody has the equal ability to sit there and respect the other person, to have a conversation in an exchange of attitudes, not an antagonism or a fight, but an exchange of things and the commonality to make things in a peaceful resolve so everybody can get along better as opposed to this thing that we have right now that divide and conquer, and there's always more money in the big event. Get a couple of prize fighters together and let's go at it. And that thing on the thing about the fix and the buzz and the dopamine and the peak and the serotonin and the dopamine up, and all of a sudden the cortisol downer. So you always got to get your fix to get looking for the ultimate high and fix and stressed out trying to find it for your peace of mind, which is the other way by the relax. But at the same time, as far as the fights and the big yeah, it doesn't make much sense, because if you put two prize fighters and they go into and they sit down and put down a tea and they sit around and have a tea and a coffee and get out their knitting, and as I said the other day, try to show who's going to win the Miss Congeniality contest. Well, not much, but the big buzz. But I digress. But here it is, folks. In the last 48 hours and that, about some things about the impossibilizing that even though I have all these things and opportunities elsewhere, I was frustrated about getting out of this area, and things stacked up, and well, people got victimized, and it was from the top, from the AI down, and an all-inclusive that wasn't good for anybody, but violatively it kind of got down to a very local level as far as credibilities, and I do apologize to a lot of people as far as what I was saying as far as truth based on fact as accountability, as they were progressively victimized and misinformed and misassumed or considered on certain things that obviously were observed at them through social media or what they were saying, and a whole bunch of things that had nothing to do with what I had said. Well, what the reality was that, other than it was seemed to be highly important for some reason, and in the aftermath, well, for political or whatever, and past things, it all went back to the credibility of some old psychiatrist and a corrupt old MLA in keeping stories straight over the years as far as a pretense, in terms of who pretended to or had credibility, which they didn't, in terms of the assumptive and the hearsay from elsewhere, and nothing to do with what came from me as the horse's mouth. Because over the last 10 or 12 years, while everybody was doing, I was realistically sitting around, no circumvention of the law, and making an ethical, honest income, and balancing out, and taking care of an elderly, widowed mother, while some things started happening, and people started assuming, and all of a sudden, other things, and inquiring minds started sticking their nose in, and interference. And the thing was that it basically ended up for people covering and trying to hide the fact that the way at the back end of it was something that had to do with something unscrupulous, but because of influence and bulletproof things about things like Mental Health Act and New World Order and Agenda 21 and all this stuff from the top on down, and AI and etc., and keeping things clear. Well, as I say, I have lots of references and things that people that would surely assess it right back to the Crown Couple and Her Majesty's Secret Service, and a whole bunch of things that went back to 97, and that Lady Di and I were exchanging correspondence and stuff. And at the end of it, in terms of the circumstances that were going on as far as what happened that night, and the reality of something was up, but in terms of what I provably, psychologically, and the indicatives that were on the news and all these other things, that something was up, that legitimately cleared up that there is no involvement on the behalf of the royal family, the Western world, of anything unscrupulous or any wish of any harm coming to Lady Di. But the truth of the matter is, of some of the things that I did know, was that she was coming home, and she was planning on coming home, and she had not had her heart stolen by the other gentleman. But unfortunately, because of that, somebody in the background, as far as pretense, unbeknownst realistically possibly to the gentleman, but some people in the periphery, there was to gain that it was seen as far as the ruse that she was going to be stolen off into the night. And the thing about her bad accident in the tunnel, no one had a speculation that the driver was going to be totally drunk and a whole bunch of other things. And essentially, as far as the accident or whatever, it was not intended to be any more than possibly something that had happened to allow the car to be stopped, at which point the princess could have been rescued. Everybody could have investigated, and the culprits would have been identified at that time. However, because of some things afterwards, truthfully, 10 years later, in the final official investigations, because it was a secret fine-tooth comb, and because of my family's service to this country and numerous things, uncle, high-ranking bureaucrat, head of the Ottawa Choral Society and that, and my aunt, director of the Royal Fort Garry and Country Club in Winnipeg for years, and director of YWCAs and Trala, and things. Well, unfortunately, it was basically conceded to me that, unfortunately, for having nothing wrong and the double check, in the interest of the truth, there was certainly in their credit that I had nothing to do with the incidences. But unfortunately, the scam and the unscrupulous from misinformation that happened from medical officials over here misaligning or misconstruing and screwing up the breakdown of communication prior to all those things that it became an awareness about me over here was from over there. Unfortunately, Her Majesty's Secret Service said that because of that, somebody concluded, and there had been an official fatwa assassination determination put over on me that had been sitting there for many years by misinterpretation or angry reaction or whatever, for me identifying some simple psychologies that said that something had been up. And as far as the conclusion, as far as what the motives and that definitely would have been, because at that time Lady Di was receiving death threats for being in opposition for landmines and those things from people over there were making landmines and stuff. And as I say, as far as tied into Mohammed Fayed or his son and that and things, I really don't think so. As far as because let's face it, the attraction of that from the young Dodi Fayed, son of an Egyptian royalty, and a very chivalrous and noble regard, gosh darn, he was going out and being nice and friendly with a pretty girl and that, and not unlike I, so what's the thing? As far as his father, no, he was respected, eminent, realistically, an Egyptian royalty, things from the king aspect, so. But the thing is about other things, about things in the adjacent and some other things about the realities about who's the big loser if they're losing arms sales and landmines and the threats. Well, as far as what I explained to the things, well, and then the fatwa came up and the realities, I took it to heart, but at the same time, I just tired and went on with life here. But in the aspects later, as far as things and stuff, the reality is, folks, that for the time being, if people do want to, and that's right, there have been noticeable things as far as legitimate celebrities and business people legitimately wanted to have a talk to me on a real serious level, but unfortunately, because AI and trying the line and trying to figure out who and how, what it was, and I found out through investigations and bureaucratic criteria, they're trying to clear it up and they want to get to the bottom, not unlike the CIA, the FBI, CSIS, ICMP, MI5, Scotland Yard, and everybody. And essentially, I've been showing all this stuff, and it kind of narrowed down in the last 48 hours about exactly how badly but it's pretty much indicative of where it was and where it was accountable by somebody sticking their nose in and doing something as misrepresentative in a psychiatric thing, world and an independent thing that was probably quite counter and contradictory to the wishes or the delegations of keeping things real in some regard as far as a whole bunch of things, but and the relative of it, it conclusively proves the time being as far as some wide open holes in Agenda 21, New World Order, and a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense as far as stuff about getting to the truth and stuff that, and AI and the reality of the thing that it's so real now as far as reproductions and the violations against contradictions in terms. You got to get back to the real. And really, so if you want to get a hold of me, my name is Lynn Johnson. My phone number is 1-306-485-9976. And Yes, my contact information will be below in the comments section if you get this is off of YouTube or if it's off of other social media. If you want to come to YouTube, just look up Gom's Gospels, Gom apostrophe S, or the name Lynn Johnson, and you can check out my other videos. But I would wish to say, as far as people locally, to the top to the bottom of that, as far as the misconstruence of the truth based on the facts from way, way back in the cover-ups that are gone as far as legislations, I really had done nothing wrong. I have been a victim of circumstance. A lot of these people that have basically been caught red-handed in conflict of interest, in violation of professional, and all these other things, that are in a really uncomfortable situation because in the simple maths and the comparatives of my ability to have a feel for things, and putting it down in scientific and conclusive to the investigative authorities, that it kind of shows that, yes, that in that 83 book about some evil conspiracy, and there was an investigative guy with that of the FBI, the CIA, that saw best to write the book and go on a speaking tour on television to expose that he he figured it was the best way to not be dealt with in not a nice way. So by having that, and at that time I saw that on television on some show in American. I ordered it by name with a hard copy old credit card receipt up at a bookstore in Grand Prairie. And then we come up to the future and I start to back at some other things. It all kind of ties together about exactly what it was, and it's focused on and conclusively, realistically, as far as big banks and authorities and INF and bankers and politicians and that, and the realistic that it's really kind of a demonic cult or terrorist aspect that is really departed from actually any religious or spiritual or states of the true religious or the getting along together of any religion in the world, as far as the love religions. Now, as far as the demonic or the satanic, it's into the personal and this and that is a departure from the God to the lover aspect, and those things, well, and the deception aspects, well, essentially, it's as simple as this. If you're not sure about something, it seems that it doesn't really add up, or it seems a little funny, and that's your intuitive. At that point, get to the horse's mouth. Or as they say, if you want to test something, or you want an evaluation on what's going on with your corporate security or sales things, or if you'd like to have your sales up to, or you need a realistic assessment about this and that, well, or world trading that, in stock market and the simple comparatives about stuff. And then I find out the conclusive that by words of mouth by people that on an impartial and that, and a quote right there right now that they say the biggest theft and crime of the take of the North Americans' wealth and stealing by a certain thing by a credible guy that has credibility in his licensing. He said it is the biggest, worst criminal theft of people's equity and misrepresentation in the history of stuff. And it was like, look, I'm doing it from horses' mouths and that. You want to get a hold of me? Get a hold of me. And as far as those people that have tried to get a hold of me in the last several days, and yes, in some regards, made a gesture to have some criteria, to have a notable sum of money given and set on me in a legitimate regard, but getting kind of stumped in that about certain criteria, I'll keep clearing the way, because the truth of the matter is, once it's out of the way, if I just, in the simplicity, as I would have wished 3 or 4 years ago to get things and move along, and as I say, on a simple small percentage on scale, have a licensing for the sheriff, but they decided to rip it off and that, and cover up and some other things that, well, it led to some good, but in the background as far as stuff by criteria and considerations from things in favor to the crown and the crown world and copyrights and that for the best overall of the North American economy and Canada and things in the overall, and our right to self-determination as opposed to getting it ganked by some clever wording of that New World Order and that, which is provably on the criteria is criminal, conspiratorial, private industry, and all it is a setup that might have been intended or instead had decided intended to be good and well-meaning by the people that signed on to it years ago. But conclusively, I can show it's nothing but a capitalistic market grab and a criminal conspiracy aspect. And basically, I can show you the quotes about the aspects of the people that, without bias and impositions, are saying exactly that. And but in the meantime, you folks decide for yourself. And here I am. But as far as other things for the time being, well, I'm scrounging around, and I do apologize down here, folks, on things, but essentially when there was numerous billions on the line and literally several attempts realistic on my life, and people were looking the other way, and I finally showed up and showed all these criteria why people were getting fooled, and police didn't know who and how and what to believe because of certain clever things in AI and software and and other things. Well, essentially, um, it just basically comes down to this: that for the time being, sure, get a hold of me. We'll qualify in some things, as I say, as instructed once again. Send me an email or basically contact a local RCMP or a member of the Legislative Assembly to basically transfer it like the MLA in my area. He's married to my first cousin by second marriage's daughter, and that, and good folks, good guy, but I'm not involved in any regard, but you know, other things, but truthfully, as far as the people that got victimized and feeling awkward and that, subject to the investigation, as they say, you were victimized by a very clever AI and a fully integrated thing. Everybody does what everybody does in order to survive. That's a known truth. So what I was doing, all I was doing was not doing anything more than identifying and putting the things on what I'd seen in the now in the analytics. No magic, but just the simple math and that of some predictables on human behavior and some things that do with the gender tendencies and that. But as I say, in the interest of equality and that, everybody has the equality and the ability to have equality by basically being fair and looking upon everybody as relevant, but relevant from their perspective and how they see it is probably realistic from their perspective. And it annoys the heck out of me when people, on the assumption that they've heard from somebody else or from an idealistic point of view that is obviously stunted or slanted or obligated by political or official or bureaucratic, that it's got to be that way, and they just refuse otherwise, and they assume or whatever and contrive for the best interest of keeping the reputation or the illusion or the structure that no matter what, even that group isn't right or wrong in that, because of the thing that they have the authority to basically say it's this way, and it's to cover up something or a mistake that they made in the past. I'm sorry, but a truth is a truth. Right is a right. Right or wrong is always right and wrong, and black is always black. And anybody that wants to argue that black isn't black and a subjective conclusion, even if there's an exact objective exact that it is, that the subject is always more bitter as far as the truth or what the objective point is, and to be used as the truth from an objective point of view, the subjective defense is obviously indicative that they have a weak thing, but they just covering their asses and have the authority and the influence to got away with that one. They haven't got away with it in the last 48 hours. And right now the reaction is that I reported out there. They're really embarrassed. We got it, but if they just play nice and be forthcoming and say this and that, as far as the walkout and the this and that about that, you can track it back to where the duress and the influence and the problem and the sort out and the accountability would be in the first place. And it comes down to the duress and the obligatory gun to the head of the authority, the influence, and all these other technologies that sorts back to some things that I basically accounted to the authorities, and for that reason, for the time being, it'll be fine, I guess, but in the meantime, it's pretty boring sitting around here where I don't want to be when I could be somebody else. But curiously, I'm being held, as far as, shall we say, confined, or held, kind of kidnapped, or being held as a prisoner of contrivance on the impression of thing of and waiting for kind of a large scale entrapment to create a condition where that, as soon as that is, then we've got something. Then somebody saves and nobody has to pay any money, and they can carry on with something. It's kind of like the age-old thing: if somebody's basically left and nobody will feed, and basically you got the lock out and that, and you're just waiting around, and eventually he's gonna have to steal something to eat, and you just see, and all of a sudden, then, oh, perfect, now we can throw him in jail, as opposed to the proper thing in the first place is give the guy something to eat and get him on and allow him to get on with his life and that. Capitalism, the highest best use. Well, if we got no use for him because he's got something that outcompete and put some other guy out of his, no, we'll just make him look this way, and we'll use him as highest best use, and I can use him as, we'll keep an eye on him. Everybody can keep an eye on him while he gets victimized. Not unlike the Jean Valjean, he stole 2 loaves of bread, then basically feed a hungry family. You put him in jail for 2 years at an additional cost, as opposed to just let him have the 2 loaves of bread. And like I say, it's not a perfect system, but the thing is, when it's perfectly evident that there's some things going on that are highly contradictory to peace and rights, things that fly in the face of the spirit of the letter of the intent of the written word when the constitutions of both North and South of the 49th were written, and a whole bunch of other things that show that things really don't make sense at this point, as our rights and freedoms would be taken away, and truthfully, the system is basically allowed to be violative and criminal, and basically, leave a contrived. Oh, yeah, well, basically, folks, I've been trying to get out of here for the last year and a half, and every time something, curiously, a bank app steals something, or, last spring there was this arrest and that, where they had me for this and that, and a whole bunch of contradictions in terms. Then all of a sudden I started informing that I had 147 realistic points of evaluation subject. What the heck's going on here? All of a sudden, well, geez, the test never happened, and the test that was happened, it was invalid because they overrode the criteria, and all of a sudden nobody knew anything. But at the same time, SGI had the thing that I did have to take a thing for an arrest on something that I wasn't impaired on. I had to take an impaired driving that had never been substantiated in court, and nobody knew anything about the records, and the test had never been given, but nonetheless I had to take a course on a test that was designed by a guy who had given a lot of tests, but as far as methodology, he sure hadn't done anything as far as methodology of teaching to have a valid criteria. But in the meantime, but connect the dots, then you have members of parliament, leaders of opposition, and prime ministers, and everybody, as far as connect the dots, north side of the border to the south side, that nobody wants to talk about it, but the things that are going in and that are fired off by a hidden app that thankfully got loaded into my phone, when the other one was facilitated as far as the cover-up by the RCMP when they were getting duped as to why. It's got a hidden FBI app and video app and things and feedback, and we'll get to the bottom of it yet. But the bottom of it is, folks, if anybody does wish to get a hold of me, nobody's going to hold it against you at this point, because they have top to bottom. They're so caught red-handed that, well, basically the people that refuse to help me or keep insisting there's something wrong with it, they're the ones that are suspected are really in on the game for this evil criminal aspect. So, as I say, if you know any way to finish off as far as that notable celebrity out there, as far as the thing and that legitimate possible prize and the vehicle and all that stuff that apparently I'd won, but's probably getting frustrated by some technical thing, and other people on other consulting, get a hold of me. 1-306-485-9976. Phone or text ahead, and we'll set up and we'll do a Zoom call, or my email is HEAVENSENTBUTTERFLY, and I apologize for the fact, folks, that I was just telling truth based on fact to basically defend against this thing that I saw as far as the bigger overall scheme. Well, I guess everybody did depart from the top to the bottom, but it's nailed down, and essentially, as far as that motivation and that cover up, as far as the diabolical of the age old thing about as far as the clergy and the banks and that, and the best way to basically do it is just to have a gun to the gun to the head of the clergy when you're basically going in there and stealing the goods out of the church or the stuff, or when you're going in for a loan to the bank, to have them well aware that the gun's under the table and it's wise to lend them the money and all those concurrents as far as that thing, and that kind of paganistic thing that has nothing to do with anything in the true beliefs of the moderate or the love or the dynamic of the peace and the peace of mind. As everybody gets more stressed out and more things behind people's backs, and governments are being more secretive about this, and well, as I say, the whole exposure is on. But if you'd like to have a serious evaluation how to do simple test markets or improve your scale of things or your sales presentations and stuff, yes, on that, I got lots of references that I do know what I'm doing. It's truth based on fact. It's proven paradigms, and yes, and phone interviews are the simple things about duplicatable and repeatable things for building downlines, which is going to have to go back to where you're going to maybe field your things out of the internet and that. But as well as that, as far as SEO and optimization, no, you need just a simple front end landing page widget or something that's just set over it. And the obvious as far as the benefit relevant to the pitch, it becomes viral. And that way you don't have to worry about these interferences and dirty tricks about AI that, well, for example, my YouTube videos and that, I've got definite feedback from one thing and another that in terms of the very limited number of views and that, they're pinching it down and misrepresenting it, but whoever it is. But then, as far as common ownership and that, and you never know, but in terms of flux dynamics and a whole bunch of, as I say, go out and Google Gom'S Gospels or Lynn Johnson, that, go through all that and flux dynamics and everything. I know what I'm talking about. It's on truth based on fact, and essentially whatever it is general knowledge and stuff. Yes, I got lots of references out there that I do know what I'm doing, so it's pretty darn ridiculous where I got people around here that, in the opinions of things, and they are consistent say, well, no, I don't know anything about that. No, I'm not familiar about this, and here's that. And but at the same time, I got track records and show consistently I do know about that. But people still deny it and represent it in their opinion, represent how, oh, the man's got serious issues and this, and very guarded thing, and the thing is, they're not even qualified to say those things. And the psychiatrist, the last time, yeah, he's fine, there's no problem, that's fine. And like I say, everybody's contradicting everybody else, but they're all taken. It's everybody else's opinions that taken without ever talking to the horse's mouth or getting it qualified from me. And when their opinion is on hearsay and supposition and an incredible opinion that is formed of a collective of academic or anecdotal assemblies of thing in a general specific conclusion, but never talking to the horse's mouth, because, well, we don't want to do that because he always explains things that show that he knows what he's doing or he knows what he's saying. Or is he really clever and he just knows exactly how to make it sound good? No. The thing is, when you're telling the truth and analyzing on the truth, you can always remember the truth. And the truth can walk around naked. Lies have to be covered up, although there's a lot of embers out there with have no clothes on and are indecently exposing by covering up on the things that it's obvious that they're trying to get away with something that is criminal, unscrupulous, and blah, 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 blah. And all those other things as far as many planks of the Marxist manifesto that went into every Western house of government back when the New World legislation went in, and all these other things. And we step more than the crime when everything goes up if we stop away from a paradigm that was working 40, 50 years ago when things were cool. And you look over at Russia and that, what made it fall when that was in there? The large corporate farm, and bigger is better and centralized, and people working under big management systems and indentured servitude as the small cottage industry things, as the paradigm that was demonstrated in Germany in the Second World War that made them almost indestructible. Because instead of one big factory there, all of a sudden, boom, the bomb goes down and the factory's gone. No, cottage industry, a whole bunch of little machine shops. If they got one, while the other 2025 just picked up a shift to the extra 10 minutes at the end of the day, kept on going. But you go over here and we're going to the law, and people, the immigrants that came from there that I knew as a kid that were grandparents and parents, and how they talked. Oh no, we don't ever want that to come here. But geez, farms are getting bigger and bigger and stretched, and GP, and satellite control and all these things, and big corporate farms and that. And geez, all of a sudden they're run by satellite and all this. Well, it's as simple as this. If you got to the point that it just took one big tractor and one big set of equipment and harvest equipment to do all the farming on the continent, and all of a sudden it needed a computer chip for the tractor broke down, you got problems. So as they say, and the truth about Keynesian economics and ongoing and increased market share and more profits against the corporate paradigm, they're shooting themselves in their own foot. And, the Laffer curve of the early 80s, excessive taxation in the wrong group of the economy inhibits economic growth. But right now, wealth and rich, they pay, oh, we're not going to pay anything, and we'll just leave berries the entry in a comfortable middle illusionary class so they can pay enough income tax and make ridiculous costs on it because you're obligated to use them. And as well as that, we'll just leave the bottom and no stimulus to keep the bottom coming up and that. And oh, well, and they'll just look useless, and we'll look upon them and call them useless, and we'll put them into housing and that at the top end because we got the cash flow, and leave there to exploit and just inventory. People, get them out of the way so we can go out and do a whole bunch of other things that make no sense in the overall. But as I say, economics, all these things. Well, my uncle now, his buddies when growing up, John Kenneth Galbraith, and around academics, diplomats, and PhDs and stuff, and well, and the old farm boy thing, or the kind of the same as the Missouri, the show me thing. Yeah, I do it. Basically, I want to see the proof, the evidence, or if you see something, well, yeah, but necessity is the mother of invention, the practicality. If you got to build you got to build out of bricks. Well, you get a brick, and you want to know how to learn how to put the brick together properly, or reverse engineering. All that, it's all simple math, and a matter of thinking about it and an objective thing to see things for what it is. Like, all of a sudden somebody, if there's something concerning, to show it to him, he's in a position he should. They just keep looking the other way, and immediately, and the doors start closing, you know something's up. Or an illegal thing when you're staying, and all of a sudden the guy's, well, I just might have to recuse myself then. Conflict of interest on something that shouldn't, in terms of everything else. Immediately, you know something's up. So as long as they keep admitting by denying, or basically honest about the say that there is something up, but then they act as there isn't, excuse me, it becomes pretty obvious that I see things objectively. So if you want to have an objective look at sales presentations or all this, or maybe who wants the copyrights on some books and that, from geometry of things, and well, and there's those other inventions that I have as far as simple flux dynamics, as far as, well, Tesla, he was always working in terms of the net balance to zero, but we're dealing in a thing with net balances, construction, destruction, and the give and the take of it. Well, the net loss in comparative actually is an 85% against mass in that, which is actually lost. So you think it's zero, but so, excuse me, but in terms of reality of the universe, there's a slow leak in the basketball. But if you deal with the formative evaluations of the real things, before the Big Bang and the after, the reality of the give and take and the after that we're looking at as reality as it become in the aftermath, and go to the formative creation dynamics, at that point you've got the formative, and then you have the Trinity, and then you have an abundance of the 1 + 1 is greater than 2, and the infinite. At that point, the basketball just keeps blowing up forever and ever, and we don't run into these cycles as the yogis, as far as the thing that's proved by the inexact calculation applied on to poof, and all of a sudden the universe runs out of steam and it goes to nothing, and then bang again. No, it doesn't have to be. It's just a matter of, well, the people that stole those geometric functions and that, if they would have just been honest with that, could have really clued them in. But it's just a matter of thinking about it and what the reality is. And now that I kind of give the insight about that form of actual creation origin function and that. Maybe they won't keep basically screwing up and things like that Montauk and that super collider that's useless for anything except creating a reality, and all these other technologies that are destructive, and the overall evaluation of the scientific people that actually are into the specialties of the science instead of just computer programmers that know how to count to two and use AI to figure out how to market and make media and get attention to sell their ideas that are upside down against the science. And the fact that they don't love me too much because our buddy's got a multiple 100 trillion that could basically over about 40 years run into a couple of quadrillion and problem solved, and everybody can have a job and realistically support 85, 90 billion people on the planet. Or if you use solfeggio frequencies and manna from heaven, who needs food? You know, there's yogis and that have been proven for years. Glass of water in the morning, glass of water in the evening, and it's just a matter of how you're thinking, fields and chakras and that. And anything's possible in terms of quantum dynamics and a conceivable thing. It's just a matter of putting yourself in the right thing and headspace to think about it and feel it, so that reality can be really achievable in terms of the reality that it is achievable if you put it in the right perspective so that it can be achieved. Simple as that, I guess. Well, think about it, and if you're confused about that, it shouldn't be. It's pretty simple to think of one or the other, but give me a call, get in contact, and we'll have coffee, oatmeal, cookies. And as far as those celebrities and people out there that did try to help me for the time being, it was a confusion, but that's a confirmation. Something's up, and there's something, but I do know what I'm talking about, so look forward to talking to you. People around here that read this and don't know whether to trust this and that. It wasn't me. I did nothing wrong. All I've been doing is explaining the fact that making it more important possible and walk those guys into the corner that, well, I have a feeling that I'll be getting some money and things will be tidied up, and I'll be on my way, and things will be getting back to normal for everybody in the world, and AI will be all cleared up, and something that I've been sending off through hard copy and mail, and some insights to Apple computers and some other software things about the broad sweeps and cross-referential. It's kind of self-policing, and everybody's going to be so held accountable that they know in terms that they don't do, unless it is going to be above board. Otherwise, the system will be set up so that they can't get away with the way it used to be before, when everybody figured the best thing to do is have it like so we can make sure nobody's cheating, and we'll have to be accountable so we know how to trust that everything is trustworthy. Blew up and became so real and things that there's no trade you can't think, and all it means is sparks of electricity. And as that guy said, the biggest criminal rake off and rip off and theft of the American equity and North American wealth in history is going on right now from an unbiased expert respected in the industry with the credentials, and he's telling the truth. So get a hold of me and I'll show you. And that's the other thing. I've got a thing for a simple thing and a currency dynamic and a whole bunch of other website concepts that against that, even in this new reality, we'll do okay. And in the meantime, I'm just, well, ain't misbehaving, just sitting around and waiting for the dust to clear and people to get real again, while everybody keeps saying they don't know what they're saying, but it sounds good from their professional opinion. But the people that are investigating here, they know that it's not making sense, and the behavior and the victimization. The reality is, hopefully I'll be getting out of here soon. If not, we just know that the people that aren't assisting me are definitely the crooks, and the ones that might step forward, we know that they're on the good side, and the authorities are certainly going to be judging at that in that according way. So in the meantime, you know how to basically show that you're in the favor of just doing things in fair and business as usual and creating jobs, some things and building an economy, while those are trying to dupe and keep our politicians victimized and pinned down so they can basically be worked over and get sold out for some big unscrupulous takeover that has nothing to do with anything that we think was going to happen according to the supposedly the good news that it's supposed to be. So seeing is believing, or maybe at the time that it happens for real. In the meantime, that is really the truth. Best regards.